We saw a demonstration of this while we were at Jeff's house, and it was pretty incredible how spraying this onto a piece of plywood protected it from just direct blasts from a flamethrower.
This crisis is real and it's here to stay. The question is, are we going to do things the same way that we have been for 1,500 years when it comes to fighting fires, or are we going to really start experimenting with new technologies and ways of fighting them?
This is Hard Reset, a series about rebuilding our world from scratch.
Hello and welcome to the Hard Reset podcast. I'm Nick Tucker and I'm here with Taylor Hamilton.
Hi.
We are the co-creators of Hard Reset, which is a show on Freethink all about how you would rebuild the world from scratch. We're joined today by Rob Chapman-Smith.
Hi, I'm the editor-in-chief of Freethink.
And Toby Morishano.
Hey, I'm a community editor at Freethink.
So this episode is about strong water, which is a fire suppression additive, something you add to water to make it literally stronger. If you haven't already, please check out the episode we did on strong water. It's super fun, and it's one of our best episodes. It profiles Jeff Denholm, who's a really incredible guy who invented this and brought it to market.
It's like an emergency package that you just put in water. Except
Right.
It retards the fire.
Right. So it's an additive for water to make it more effective at fighting fires.
Stronger.
It's stronger water.
Stronger
water. It says what it is. That's what I love about it.
H3O.
Yeah.
Boom.
So why is this something that you wanted to cover, Taylor?
Well, because I'm a Californian and my whole state is on fire every year, multiple times a year.
Yeah.
And I think 2020 was incredibly shocking because deep in the pandemic, when I had just been exposed to COVID, the sky also turned orange. It was orange the entire day. I mean, it was so surreal, and everybody was like, haha, it's like Blade Runner 2049. And I'm like, yeah, that was a little dystopian. Right. And we're literally living it. I mean, it was one of the 5 times in my life that I've actually had this out-of-body experience of what is happening?
Yeah.
This is not real. The sky is blue. Right, children?
Normally.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was reading the Octavia Butler book, The Parable of the Sower. At the time, yeah. You've read this.
Yeah.
And it's all about how there's constantly fires happening all over the place because there's this drug that makes people obsessed with fires. And it's this very dystopian novel set in a very real, near future. And there's this constant oppressive atmosphere of things on the horizon being on fire. And I'm reading this as the world is on fire, and it freaked me out so much that year.
Well, and one of the things that is interesting in terms of all the disasters is that, an earthquake or a hurricane or a tornado, you can't really prevent. But fires, you can kind of prevent. I mean, a lot of them are man-made. And so the question was, well, how can we stop this? Who is doing it? And we actually spent a lot of time researching just what is happening in the world in terms of people that are trying to prevent and suppress fires. Right. And we came across this guy, Jeff Denholm, and he was interesting as a human. And then the product also seemed like, oh my God, why aren't we doing this? He seems like he already figured out the solution here.
Right. It's kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah.
We talked about fire for months, it felt like, because it was so on our mind. It's clearly so important. And there are so many interesting things happening. And we wound up doing 2 episodes on different aspects of this. One about strong water and one about why fire, and very different approaches to understanding this big problem. But this one I think is really important because how we fight fires is it saves lives. I mean, it's literally a life or death thing.
Yeah, so there's 2 sides of this, right? There is the prevention of fires, and then there's the suppression of fires.
Right.
And it's really helpful when you're doing all this research to think about everything in those 2 general categories. And so this is really about suppression. So when there already is a fire,
right,
how do you stop that fire?
Yeah.
So this crisis is real, and it's here to stay. And so the question is, how do we stop it? And the strong water seems to be a really, really great solution towards doing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
For folks who haven't seen the video yet, could you just explain what exactly strong water is?
Yeah. So strong water is an additive. It's a gel, I believe, additive that mixes into the water and makes it stick and cling to things the way hair gel does, essentially. Sorry.
That brings up another reference.
I mean, it looks like hair gel.
It looks like white hair gel.
It looks like hair gel. And so they normally do this. So if there is a fire, and it's usually like in the wildland, meaning just like there's lots of trees and stuff around and they're close to homes. As this fire is getting bigger and bigger and getting closer and closer to homes, what they'll do is the firemen will get close to the fire, and then they will mix this gel with water that they are bringing on their trucks, and then they use it to spray the houses.
So it's a protective shield for the houses, essentially, that are close to fire.
And vegetation.
And vegetation.
One of the things that I think people might not realize is when you just drop water over trees or bushes or whatever, it's mostly just going to drip down off the trees onto the ground.
Right.
Or the ambient heat of the fire as it approaches is going to evaporate it off. But with this sort of gel additive, it clings to the surfaces and offers a lot more protection. And it doesn't evaporate away as quickly as something would when the heat starts to get close.
What do you find most interesting about just the technology around strong water?
I think for me, what I liked the most about this is that it was just eminently practical. It was someone who was very passionate about making a better alternative, looking at the problem from the point of view of the people who are fighting fires, thinking about their health, the environment, and how it's affected by the use of these things, and sort of working backwards to find a solution. And he did it. And there's, the part of his story that I really love is that he was complaining about how he doesn't like the red Phos-Chek that they're dropping, and how he thinks it's bad for himself and the environment and a lot of the people who are working around it. And he's complaining about this to someone, and they're like, well, what are you going to do about it? And he actually does something about it. I mean, how many times have you complained about something? And
I complain about you all the time.
Yeah, I know. And then I say, what are you going to do about it? And then you just storm off angrily, right?
That's great. You grabbed your
that's
shoe
fine.
a minute ago.
But he didn't do that. He actually took this problem head on. And I really just sort of love that he took a very practical, sensible approach to it and solved this. And he's made a very good alternative to the traditional fire retardants.
Does it cause problems with existing equipment? Like, does it gum up the works in the hoses or anything like that?
So that's part of the design of strong water versus other additives. Mm-hmm. There are other gel additives out there, but by and large, the way they work is that the fireman has to have a big backpack on with special hardware, and the hose hooks into it, and they have to carry this giant tank of stuff and spray it out. And, being top heavy, working in unideal circumstances in the heat.
With 100 pounds of
Right.
gear on you.
It's crazy ergonomics. So what's different about this is that it can work with existing mixing technology they have on the trucks, and they can just spray it from the hose the way they normally would just water. Mm-hmm. So that's an important ergonomic thing for the firefighters on the ground. As far as using it in the air, it's different from most other additives in that it's not corrosive, and so you can use it with more types of delivery mechanisms.
This is the part that's actually most exciting about it. So Phos-Chek, which is the retardant that is used most often, is that like pink red stuff that you see drop from a plane. And that stuff is kind of like the industry standard. And the problem with it is that it is corrosive. There's the environmental reasons, right? It gets into the rivers, it kills fish, it kills the animal life. Like there's that side of it. But the other problem is that you cannot put Phos-Chek into helicopters. Right. And the reason why helicopters are better than planes in a lot of ways is most firefighters will tell you that the trick to fighting a big fire is to put it out when it's a small fire. And so time is really the big deal here. So that when there is a fire, that hopefully there's an early detection warning system. That can be sensors, that could be a person, right? That is seeing that there is a fire that has happened, and you want to get to that fire as quickly as possible and put it out while it's still small and still contained. If you have to do that with a plane, that means that you have to launch from a place with like a large landing strip, right? You have to take that plane off. And there aren't that many places that have those. And you have to like fuel this thing, and it's big, and there aren't many, and then you have to hopefully fly it and drop it while that fire is still small. Mm-hmm. If you, in the future, have a lot of helicopters and helicopter pads where you can just kind of launch from everywhere, then you can have a lot more of these, and they can be in closer proximity to where the potential fire will be.
Right.
And then the future thing is that these aren't actually just manned helicopters, that they are drones that are automatically taking off with something like strong water that is not corrosive, and that's why they're able to put out these fires when they're small.
And helicopters have a relatively small capacity for the amount of fluid they can carry and drop, but with something like a gel additive like this, you can get a lot more value out of that drop, and that helps make them competitive with airplanes in terms of how effective they are putting out fires. Another key differentiator here is just how much better this is for people and the environment. This was designed because Jeff is an environmentalist who, spends a lot of time out in the wilderness. He's been an extreme athlete doing surfing and things like that for forever. He really cares about making sure that he's not having a negative impact on the environment. And they designed this to be something that's biodegradable and non-toxic. It doesn't have any PFAS and some of these other forever chemicals in it. And it's a very safe substance. Mm-hmm. To me, it was really just well designed around the people who are going to be using it. Because at the end of the day, we don't want to be contaminating firefighters who are out there putting their lives on the line to protect our homes and our communities with something that isn't really well understood in terms of how it impacts their health.
Right.
Another key advantage is just how well the gel lasts. Mm-hmm. It lasts over a longer period of time, whereas water just, again, dries up in the sunlight. This will stick and cling. We saw a demonstration of this while we were at Jeff's house, and it was pretty incredible how spraying this onto a piece of plywood protected it from just direct blasts from a flamethrower.
That's incredible.
And first of all, how much fun is it to have a flamethrower?
I was like, can I use the flamethrower? They're like, no.
No.
Please.
But
Don't be throwing matches, but if you get a flamethrower, go to town.
But testing it out, I mean, it was dramatic, where instant scorching and flames on the unprotected wood, and the other one, he had it on there for a long time.
Right.
And it was still gel covered at the end of it.
Yeah, and my understanding is that even though it has this ability to last for a while, that when the fire is totally extinguished, that it is relatively easy to get rid of as well.
Right.
That there is some level of being able to spray it down with water and it goes away. It's
Yeah.
not like easy breezy, but it's better than your house being covered with pink slime.
Right. Right.
But by the way, Jeff is not a chemist, right? He
Right.
actually worked with actual chemists to devise all of this. But from our understanding, this is worth exploring, right? Mm-hmm. That there aren't really downsides that we can really see here. Mm-hmm. It seems to be it's around the comfort of these different fire departments taking this on, trying it. We were lucky enough to go to San Bernardino, a couple hours away from here, mm-hmm. and see how they're starting to use this because it's a huge county and they get fires all the time and they have to try something. So it's about change and being comfortable with that change, and then knowing as a citizen, if you're in one of those places, they're going to try something that is probably fairly new here.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The fire suppression aspects of this are super interesting and fascinating, but Jeff as a human is one of the most fascinating people that I've ever met. He really, you look at someone like Tom Cruise, this big action movie star, and you're like, oh no, Jeff is like that in real life. He just seems to have a desire to throw his body into dangerous situations as much as humanly possible. And
very dangerous, it turns out.
Yeah. And whether it's riding waves or skiing or fighting fires, he's that's what I'm all about. He is an action junkie and real badass, a true badass.
Yeah. Yeah. And his approach to things is he just doesn't seem intimidated by the challenges. And I really love that about him, that he's this sucked that I lost my arm, but I'm not going to let that stop me from being a surfer. And he invented all these prosthetics that help him surf and work better for him in his situation in a way that I think a lot of people might have not made that extension. And I really love that he's kept at it, even though there's some natural things stacked against him.
Yeah, and it was one of those parts about the story in terms of him losing the arm where, it's is that an important part of the story? But I think for him as an inventor, it seems to be a real reason why he started to become an inventor, right? He had this unfortunate accident that happened to him in his 20s, and he decided to not let that stop him from doing anything. And so he has been designing a lot of the prosthetics for himself. One of the things that he was talking about when we were going around his house was, his personal gym, and how if you have only one arm, that the part of the problem is that you will start to, have muscles develop on one side of your body and not the other side. And so a lot of the exercises that he's doing are to kind of compensate for that. This is why swimming is so good. It's a good natural exercise for him to be able to be balanced. And so he just seems like a guy that's really about adaptability, being this is what happened, here's how I'm going to adapt to the situation.
Right.
And I thought that was such a great mindset for thinking about fires, where it's like, listen, here's where we're at. There's going to be a lot of fires all over the world, especially like in the western part of the United States. The question is, are we going to do things the same way that we have been for 50, 100 years when it comes to fighting fires, or are we going to really start experimenting with new technologies and ways of fighting them?
Right. Yeah. And his inherent, ability to just reject the status quo and say we don't have to keep doing things the same way is really, I think, an integral part of the story.
Right.
So this was something that came up with in the comments a lot. A lot of people were concerned about environmental impacts, PFAS, et cetera. And I think you've addressed a lot of aspects of that. But I guess what it also gets at is people are like, what's the catch? Is there some downside that we might not be asking about with this substance? And, maybe more explicitly, like, what's it made out of? Or if you can tell us.
So a lot of the ingredients are proprietary, and we worked with Jeff to talk about this in a way where we're not revealing any proprietary secrets about how it's made, and he's fairly protective of that. He did work with chemists, I think it was at UC Berkeley, who helped him develop this, and he found the right people to help him make a substance that met the safety requirements and the efficacy requirements and the ease of use requirements that he had for this, and kind of designed it around that. And I think it's an interesting way of solving the problem. Instead of saying like, hey, I've got this substance that has this properties, it might also kill people and fish, but it's really great at putting out fires. He said, well, what if we start with the qualities that we really need to identify and built around that? And I think that's, created a product that seems very effective, and hopefully we'll see broader adoption over time. And more fire departments are using it over time. He's been working, really working hard to find a way to get more firefighters and for fire departments to use it. And it seems to be working.
How many people has Jeff talked to about this? I know you say he's trying to push other fire departments to use this, then the decision of like what retardant to use is local to some extent, but it's also not local to a lot of extent. Like we're spending a lot of money, federally speaking, on fire retardants. I think the figure for 2021 was around $4 billion is what we spent. And like half of all of that gets dumped in California. So it seems like California has a pretty big incentive to utilize something like strong water. I'm curious, like, how far is Jeff taking this campaign to like get strong water out there?
Right. I mean, it's a huge business problem.
Yeah.
And there's
That's why
so
he's doing
many,
this video.
Yeah, well, yes. Obviously.
I mean, there's so many entrenched interests in this.
Yeah.
It's a $4 billion industry, to your point.
Yeah.
If you're the person who's selling $4 billion worth of not great fire retardant, you're going to fight like hell to keep that business.
Right.
And you are going to protect your customers and try to protect your business with those customers as hard as you can. So there's a huge uphill climb. And because a lot of those buyers are not, this is not like you're competing for people between Coke and Pepsi.
Right.
You're competing with an institutional buyer. You're competing with states and local governments, people who are buying something that they aren't necessarily using. They're buying it for the fire departments who work within their municipality or within their statewide district to use. And so there's all sorts of interesting conflicting problems, I think. There's the 4 ways of spending money, right? Like you spend someone else's money on something for someone else.
Right.
The way you make those purchasing decisions is very different than when you spend your own money on something for yourself. And I think that, to me, is kind of the problem that you're in when you are trying to sell something at an institutional level.
The other issue here, I think, is just that a lot of the fires that are being fought are wildland fires as opposed to structural fires. So most of us that live in cities, 80% of Americans live in cities, are like not in the places where there are like lots of trees and stuff around that regularly catch fires. And so the people, if I'm living in a city, I'm not necessarily aware of all these problems, but then I become affected down the road when there's a huge plume of smoke that is, filling the air everywhere. I mean, I think the last fire, Laura, our producer in DC, could see the fires from California, that all the smoke had traveled all the way across the country. So the trifecta of solutions that are going to be the hard reset seems to be sensors that are out in the wildland all over that are doing early detection. Those communicating with drones, unmanned aircrafts that are taking off the moment that a fire starts to become detected, and then the payload, that is something like strong water, is on there in order to put out that fire before it becomes a big fire. It seems like if all three of those things can happen, then it will really change how many fires we have, how big those fires get, and it will be a hard reset on how we're doing suppression.
Right.
Is this like just Jeff, or is it like a larger company? Because I mean, one of the other issues potentially is if you're, a big fire department that it goes through thousands and thousands of gallons, you need a certain amount of scale in order to train your people on it and incorporate it into your process, I imagine.
Yeah, how much gel is he producing?
Yeah, I don't know the volume of sales they have, but I mean, there's obviously more than just Jeff on the team. There's people who are helping him with the chemistry and manufacturing. He also employs people who help with his firefighting activities, and so there's a lot of people involved in this. I wouldn't say it's a massive conglomerate of people, but it's definitely more than just him. Can he scale up? That remains to be seen.
Yeah, but probably. I mean, I think the solution, the literal solution, is there, and so in the users, like, it's really easy to use. I mean, they literally just have like this giant bucket essentially. You get a regular old drill, handheld drill. You just kind of put it in, spin it, and then you just dump it in the truck. Like, that's all it seemed like they were doing.
Yeah, there's a tank. A lot of these trucks have a tank built in to pour an additive into.
Gotcha.
And this is compatible with those. So it's what you would put the Phos-Chek or these other additives in.
Gotcha.
It doesn't require the backpack or the extra hardware. It just goes right into the truck and mixes with the water and gets sprayed out. It's super duper easy.
Yeah. And one of the things that really struck me when we interviewed a fireman was that he was just talking about how antiquated a lot of the technology is that firemen use. It's still basically hoses and ladders.
And axes and shovels. It's just
I'm
basic
like,
stuff.
Taylor, don't say hose. It's not hose and ladders. Hoses and ladders. And I was like, oh my God. Like, on one side of it, you kind of understand, right? If it's your house that is burning, you don't want the fireman to show up with some like experimental new technology, right? You're like, give me the tried and true. Like, give me like what has worked. And that collectively has been the mentality for basically many firemen, right?
Yeah. And if you're a fireman, you don't want to be fiddling around with some new piece of technology when you've got like a breathing apparatus on and it's all foggy and smoky and people are dying around you and it's very dangerous. You want something that has a very simple, easy to use thing. You want it to be easy.
Yeah, and it seems like, there's so much bureaucracy when it comes to, these are usually government bodies that are essentially giving money in order to start this. So, in the episode that we did about the robots, this guy was like, you know what, I just took this drone that I got for Christmas, I just started flying that drone and using it to help us fight fires. And now there's actually been much more of like a systematic effort in order to figure out how to use drones in wildland fire prevention and suppression.
This invention is something that makes me really wish we had more like World's Fairs type of things.
Right.
Because like the demonstration is so like you immediately get it once you see it sort of type of thing. And the video does some work, but even just in person.
Free think fair. Come on. I mean, be the change you want to see in the world.
Well, honestly, we talk about Free Think as the World's Fair, but like as a publication. So like that's a metaphor that we use internally. And I do think this version of that would be fantastic. Like you could see this demo live in person. I seriously do wonder about the incentives of somebody like Gavin Newsom to look at something like this and like scale it up immensely. There's a clear problem that exists in your state around this type of thing. And you have tons of people who are innovating around this, yet how much are we focusing on those innovations in terms of this stuff?
There are so many problems that we have in the state and country and everything else that those are the ones that usually get attention, the things that are in your face every day, right? And so these things where it's preventative, essentially, people forget about them, right? I will say that I was like really hoping that this video would go viral. It didn't. Thank you for watching. Hopefully this podcast helps with it. But it's one of those things where like when fires are happening, people are concerned about them. They're paying attention. The moment a fire isn't happening, you kind of forget about it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of essentially the problem. I think the thing we should realize is that these fires are here to stay. There is a fire season. They're going to get bigger. And like there's these small, like the solution is here. That's the crazy part about this. So many of these ideas that we talk about are like, oh, well, we're working towards it. But this is something where at least this part of the equation seems like it's kind of been solved.
Right. Well,
I don't
one
know that
thing-
it's
oh, sorry.
solved, but I think it's a great tool. And I think any tool that can help with this is super valuable right now. And it just feels like we're just not doing that. And it's really strange that we continue to just sort of march forward without making any adjustments.
Well, we, just to go back to the firefighter that was using the drone he got for Christmas, in terms of like showing like what the POV was in terms of structural fires and wildland fires. It seems like that happened, and then 3 years later, there's like a whole formal program around this.
Yeah.
And so big change can happen in a little bit. It's just like, who are those few people that are going to take the risk? And fortunately, like San Bernardino County seems to be one of the fire departments that's doing that.
Yeah.
And hopefully, like, people watch this video and like there are more that come about.
Yeah.
Are we going to address the elephants in the room?
Yeah, we probably should.
All right. Nick, explain.
Explain yourself.
Oh my God. So this episode is notorious within our team as a fatal error, totally on my part. I made a huge miscalculation with this episode, I think. I don't think there's any denying that strong water, when applied, bears a striking resemblance to a certain bodily fluid. And everyone
Explain this like your mother's watching.
She is.
everyone who sees it notes it. Everyone. And so I thought, since that's what people are going to say in the comments, we should get ahead of it and just say it. Hang a lantern on this. That I know it looks like a bodily fluid, but it's not. And it's a little bit of a laugh, and we can move on from that. I thought that was the right call, and so we make a little joke about it, which, by the way, I don't think is the most like edgy joke in this episode.
What is the edgiest joke in this episode?
I think the edgiest joke in this episode
That you came up with and executed by yourself.
100%. I take full ownership of this, all responsibility. Was that when we introduced Jeff Denholm, we say he's the man who is single-handedly revolutionizing the way we fight fires.
This is Jeff Denholm. He's the man who is single-handedly changing the way we fight fires. For context, he does everything single-handedly because, turns out working on a commercial fishing boat is very dangerous.
Because he does everything single-handedly
like
because
him.
he's an amputee, which is admittedly very crass, but also I think a little bit funny, and it's meant in good nature, and he took it in good nature and raised no objections, and we thought it was a fun way to do it. I thought that was edgier than pointing out that strong water looks like a fairly
people
well-known.
are viewing this video on the internet where,
Yeah.
other things are happening.
Yeah.
Either
So-
before or after they were watching this.
So in the original version of this video that we released, it opened up with that this was not, in fact, that bodily fluid. It was strong water, and it was used to fight fires. And we sort of drew an underline that it's a kind of gel by referencing the something about Mary gag, where Ben Stiller has hair gel or something that looks like hair gel dripping down from the side of his ear.
This is high-tech water. Now, I know it looks like a bodily fluid, but it's not, I promise you. It's a kind of gel.
Is that a hair gel?
Yeah.
No, not hair gel.
And people thought this was funny, I thought. But a few people did not find this funny. Some people were very offended by this. We edited that joke off the beginning of the episode. And YouTube was gracious enough to let us re-upload and do a content swap so that it's the same URL and comments, but minus the gag about it looking like semen.
I mean, the only thing.
Whoa, semen? We were talking about semen?
But I do want to note that after we did that, there were plenty of comments about like how it looked like semen.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing that it really. One of the things that I was pondering after this controversy was whether it would be worth it to put some dye into this. Right? It's obviously, something where they're selling to a government what this thing is, but like, you got to get the people involved. And like, should they dye this thing pink and have it look kind of like Phos-Chek and kind of remind you of that?
Or blue.
Blue.
There's no blue bodily fluids. I hope not.
I mean, I think you just switch it to whatever like creature is that color. So if it's blue, it's a Smurf. If it's pink, it's Kirby. Like,
Yeah. It's fine. If it saves your house, you do anything.
I'm going to read you some of these comments.
Yes, Toby, please do. Save me.
All right. Let's see. We're all thinking it. They know exactly what they're doing with this thumbnail. Stay strong, NNN brothers. No, not November.
Oh, wow. Wait, did we release this in November?
It was re-released near then.
Okay.
Never knew I could be of such service to humanity. OMG, stepbro, the kitchen's on fire. Don't worry, I got this. Yo, if my house is on fire and this is all they got, let it burn. Let it burn. Don't come in here, Mom. I'm fighting forest fires.
I wonder who out here has tried to extinguish a fire with. Anyway, gone.
I hope not.
You made the joke.
I made the joke, but it demanded to be made.
No, it does not. You could just stay wide. Stay wide.
My joke, I think when we had the joke in there, it diffused these comments by getting ahead of them.
Yeah.
But I do think that it was going to be made either way. People are going to make the association because it is the internet.
There we go.
It's only a matter of time before someone makes the most lewd comparison. We made a slight miscalculation, but I think we moved past it relatively gracefully.
Okay, what are the other comments?
I mean, that's most of them.
I'm vindicated by this. Thank you guys for having this conversation. I really enjoyed this episode of Hard Reset, and I really enjoyed talking about it with you and responding to some of the audience comments. And I hope everyone who listened or watched enjoyed it as well. So please make sure you like and subscribe and enjoy the next episode of the Hard Reset podcast.